Lilo and Stitch undergoing a woke boycott, and John Leguizamo not looking so well as a bond market update. Could it trigger a digital currency? As well as my producer Nat on the mic, kicking ass and taking names. Why don't you say hi?
Hello.
Okay, let's get right into it. Let's start with Lilo and Stitch. Now, we had our live review last night on our main show, Nat and the Guy Live at 9:15 Central Time, not every night, but Monday through Friday. I absolutely love the movie, but I could relate to it a lot because I used to live in Hawaii for a while, and my parents died at a fairly young age, so it really drew me in. We did have a couple commenters pointing out there were a couple woke elements, and I do agree now that I think about it. But overall, I thought it was, for the moderates, I thought it had some conservative, very much a lot of conservative plot points. Some of those which were added after, and it had a couple woke plot points as well. I'll be fair.
But I think also I think they're looking too hard into it because now everything seems woke. But some of the things that they're pointing out is actually just us living in a modern real world. Like, you can't avoid that because it is a fact of life.
Well, and I really,
like them being Hawaiian.
I would somewhat disagree with that, but I would also agree with it. I would say that Disney is under a lot of political scrutiny from both the left and the right now, and that's why they're trying to get back to the center. The more they try to get back to the center, the more backlash they have from the groups on the polls. I really thought they struck a really good balance with this movie. I really liked the movie, and most movies I've gone to lately, such as The Conclave, Mission Impossible, I wasn't a big fan. So it was really nice just to see a good, solid, traditional movie with real family values in it. The ending had a little bit of a twist, which some are complaining it went away from family values. I don't think so. I bought into it. I liked it. What did you think, Nat? Oh, they can't hear you if you just shake your head. Yes.
I was trying to drink water. I mean, I did notice it. I said, of course. But at the same time, it's like, well, most of it was fine. And yeah. I think people at least now have to kind of start nudging Disney in the right direction, because it's not about forever boycotting it. If they start removing a lot of those policies and do start listening to reality and common sense, I think people should still go and should still notice it, because it's such a big company and has such a global influence on the world, that if now they're moving more towards the center or even more towards like traditional family values, that's a good thing, regardless of if you like the company or not.
Yeah, and surprisingly, this backlash isn't coming from the right or the traditionalists. It does have a couple woke points, but nobody's really saying anything on the right about this, which is good. I like the movie. I can look past its few little flaws, which were very few for the emotional impact it was able to really strum on my heartstrings. This backlash is actually coming from the left, and I don't think the left has enough purchasing power to actually make a legitimate boycott. They're not able to appeal to a broader audience. I watched a ton of YouTube videos today about leftists talking about boycotting this movies, and they have two major complaints. Number one is the little girl's older sister. They say she's too white. Now, the fact is, if you watch the movie, she looks completely Hawaiian. She fits the role perfectly. She kind of looks like the other girl's sister. She's not overly beautified. I really like the casting of her, but in her headshot picture, when she auditioned for the role, she looked a lot more Caucasian.
And she actually is Hawaiian. Like, she has Hawaiian.
She's mixed, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought she fit the role perfect. So the fact that they're complaining about her headshot looking too Caucasian, when in the movie she didn't look like that at all, it just shows she can play diverse characters. And number two, the second boycotting is really going out on a limb here. But what was his name in the movie?
Who?
The boyfriend's name.
David. The character of David, the boyfriend to the older sister in the movie. In 2023, they originally cast somebody that put a playlist on Spotify of some of his favorite music. One of the songs happened to have the N-word in it, so the left wanted him canceled because that was completely inappropriate. So they fired him from the cast at the last moment and replaced him with the David that you now see in the movie. I also liked the David that we see in the movie. I think he was probably Hawaiian. Mm-hmm. The original casting, the guy seemed Mexican. He had a Mexican last name. He was mixed Mexican Hawaiian.
Okay.
But they were also, initially when he was casting, he was too white and too European centric and too European looking. Actually, all of the cast got that same treatment.
Not what about the little
The
girl?
left was saying, oh, too. They were saying, oh, they all look, they're trying to erase the actual nativeness of the character, the animated series, blah, blah, blah.
This is ridiculous. I used to live in Hawaii, and I didn't just live in Hawaii. I lived with an actual tribe in the mountains of Maui for about a year. And I think people are going to love this movie in general. This is a hyped up woke backlash from the left coming at this movie because they really pushed this thing back to the moderate center. And at the end of the movie, they really talked about patriotism and knowing who you are and family values. And this was sprinkled throughout the movie. It was really family value centric. And we know the left, whether it's the Marxist left or the super progressive left, is really about ripping the family unit apart.
But we have had comments, because I spoke so positively about it, saying that it doesn't actually respect traditional family values and that the ending, well, I mean, we're not going to spoil it, but that the ending completely ruins it. And I don't fully agree with that.
I come from a family where I was kind of like an orphan. My mother died at a young age. I didn't have a father. My grandparents had to raise me later on after my mother passed away. So this movie really, really did appeal from a storyline basis. And everybody's not going to have a traditional family, but when they did talk about the family, they talked about the parents dying. They talked about the relationship of
the sisters.
The sisters to the parents, the sisters to each other, how they're a family unit. They constantly were talking family, family, family. So yes, it wasn't a traditional family in the sense that the parents passed away, but there are situations in life that are pretty common where people fall into that. Mm-hmm. So it just shows you how lucky you are if you do have a traditional family unit.
Exactly.
And the people in this movie longed for that family unit. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, they weren't all happy and just figuring it out like Anna and Elsa do. Like they become like the difference between Anna and Elsa and Nani and Lilo is that Anna and Elsa, like they just mention their parents passed away and then they remember them, but they don't have that longing. They don't show the importance of it. They show that two strong female sisters can get like do everything and become queen and princess and go on adventures. And this one, the importance, and they keep mentioning it and bringing it back and saying, well, we're going to keep trying, even though, and they taught us enough to be able to take care of each other, stuff like that. So they do harken back to that importance of family and being raised properly.
Well, yeah, and on this channel, we do come from more of a conservative-leaning bent, I think, and maybe a little bit of a populist bent. That being said, we do live in a modern society, and to please all audiences at the same time is going to be hard. This movie, I think, hit the mark very well overall. There can be very little things you can nitpick on both the left and the right. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think this was a fantastic movie. I would highly recommend it. And I couldn't say that about Mission Impossible. I know Nat liked it a little bit more than I did. But of the two movies, I would suspect Lilo and Stitch is going to do far better on the theater as far as longevity goes. And even initial box office sales because it is going to appeal to the entire family. And it does have rewatchability appeal. Okay.
And Rafa says...
Oh, good. Rafa's here. He hasn't seen it yet, but I'm waiting on your opinion after you go see this movie tonight.
Rafa says, skibbity bop bop bop. Yes, yes, skibbity skibbity. So thank you for making me read that.
Okay. What time is he going to the movies tonight for that, he said yesterday?
I think he said he was going to go watch it.
Okay. I'm interested to see his opinions because we had quite a few comments going against
on my Spanish review where I was kind of happy about it and okay with it. People were not happy about me giving Disney a chance. But once again, for society's sake, I think it's important that most companies just remove all the politics, go to the center, and at least display some semblance of traditional values.
Yeah, I mean, I nail Disney on this channel all the time, every chance I get, because I want to push them in the right direction, not because I hate Disney. This is one of those times they went in the right direction. Hopefully at the box office, they're rewarded with that, so it continues to push them in the right direction. If this movie does have a major boycott, and it did hit a really traditional note in a lot of senses, they're not going to continue to go that way. They're going to go back to the left.
Mm-hmm. So and not even like just Walt Disney, those were his values, and I do like Walt Disney, the person, the creator. So just reminding them of that's what the company's supposed to be.
Okay, we've talked a lot about this in the last few shows, so we'll move on to the next subject matter, and that was John Leguizamo. I actually put him on the cover. Mm-hmm. He may be pretty familiar with our Spanish audience, and we got quite a bit of a Spanish audience because of our other channel, which is Nat and the Guy in Espanol. But John Leguizamo is really disappeared into the from the public eye in the States, except for his TDS syndrome. That's his Trump derangement syndrome. He's constantly coming out with things, saying different things. I've seen a lot of different videos. He's never looked this bad. Now, what he's saying could make coherent sense to a very progressive leftist maybe, but just the way he looks, I'm a little bit worried about him. He still has a little bit of weight on him, but it looks like he's really starting to maybe hit the pipe again. He has a history with drugs, so I really do hope the best from him, even though we disagree on a lot of our political opinions. We'll listen to what he says, but man, he's not looking good at all.
And I don't think he's not popular in Latin America. Like all of these Latino actors that are in the States are not really popular here.
I liked him when I was a kid. He was in Mario, and he was actually very big back then. And he started as a comedian, and he was fairly funny. And I used to like him a lot. Since he's really gone hard into politics, I think it's really hurt him. He should have just stayed out of it. Okay, let's play the clip.
7, study the collapse and the comeback. You should be learning from South Korea and how they managed their brief rule under dictatorship. They didn't waste time chasing the one man with absolute immunity. They went after the structure, the aides, the enforcers, the loyalists, the architects. They knocked out the foundation one pillar at a time until the strong man had no one left to stand on, and his power crumbled beneath him.
Yeah, you can look at his eyes. They're really kind of glossed over, and I mean, there's something about his eyes where he looks like he may be on drugs or something. And if he were coherently expressing these opinions on a regular basis, such as a podcast, I would like to see him on where he doesn't have to go so hard and he could really explain his point of views, even though I don't agree with his opinions. I'll be a lot less likely to think he's on drugs. He's really putting this vitriol out there about politics with this short little clip, and he's always going on about Trump, 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 orange man bad. Explain your views in a longer format where people can actually coherently understand you, and you might win some moderates over, and maybe you can even open up a dialogue with the right. But when you're talking like this, I mean, what are we going to talk about?
Well, they don't want to dialogue.
Okay, let's continue to talk.
You should be independently investigating every author of Project 2025, every aide who defies court orders, every communications director repeating lies, every policy writer enabling cruelty, every water boy who keeps this engine running. You can't stop a regime by asking the king to sit down. You dismantle the throne he's standing on, one coward at a time.
And this is
Stop being scared.
And this is really showing what's kind of going on with the radicalization of the left right now. This isn't just John Leguizamo. This was Mangione when he went after the gentleman in New York City in broad daylight. Then this was the fire bombings of hundreds of Tesla dealerships around the country and individual owners they were doxing. And you're having stars like John Leguizamo kind of endorsing this and pushing this forward. They have a bit of a radicalist army behind them that over the last 10 years, they weren't getting arrested and there were no repercussions. So they are very emboldened to do more and more violent acts at this point. Just yesterday, we talked about the story of the two people exiting the Jewish, what do you call it? Fundraiser.
The two Israeli staffers. But with him right now, it's very clear he's reading something. So who's giving him that script? His eyes were going back and forth like he's reading. I mean, it's very clear, you can tell. So who's giving them these scripts? Who's telling them to publish it on social media? I
mean, this isn't coming from the heart. And if you can't read properly, just come from the heart. Every time I come on my afternoon show, there's never any script. Even on the night show, none of my shows there's a script because I can't read off a prompter very well. So I have to take notes and I have to know the basic stories fairly in depthly. I have to have a broad knowledge, meaning, yes, I gather the stories in the morning and I don't know the details of a lot of the stories until the nighttime, but I have a broad enough scope where I can relate it to past history and facts because I do a daily show. Because he's not doing something on a daily basis, or he maybe doesn't know the issues inside and out, it's very hard for him to speak from the heart or talk off the top of his head. He really needs the script he's an actor. You should be able to read the script.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm asking who's giving these actors these scripts, because a lot of the times when they're going against Trump or railing against the right, they're reading and very clearly reading. So who's telling them to do this? Who's paying them to do this?
Yeah, I wish the best for John Leguizamo, but I mean, the gentleman's been captured for a long time, and he's in that element of woke Hollywood where they put you on the commercial during an election run-up, and they expect to win the election on celebrities' voices.
Yes, and we saw it with a lot of other celebrities during Kamala Harris as well. They were all reading whenever they seemed all angry. You could see their eyes and they were reading some script someone gave them. Rafa says, sorry, Nat, for making me read the Skibbity thing. And then he also says, yes, he'll watch it. He says, yes, I'll watch it tonight and let you know on Monday's live about Lilo and Stitch.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, okay, let's go into the bond market really quickly. And the bond market, the rates in the U.S. are now starting to go up, which isn't a good sign because we talked about the collapse of the bond market in Japan. With the bond market going up in the United States, it's not going off a cliff yet, but it's trending definitely in the wrong direction. If the EU follows suit after Japan, that will mean the rates in the US are going to skyrocket even further and a potential collapse of the US dollar. Again, I talked about this in a couple previous shows. It's a very complex issue, but Trump is currently trying to save the US bond market by insulating it by legislating stable coins. There's something called the Genius Act coming up on May 27th. They're going to take a vote. They've kind of got it through the first few stages they need. They took some things out of the act, and now this will be more permanent legislation for stable coins, so they can borrow against the future earnings of stable coins, and then they can use that money to invest in their own U.S. bond market, long-term bonds, so they can kind of secure or insulate the bond market from outside interference, such as the EU. Why don't you read what the Genius Act says there on the notes that I wrote?
So the Genius Act, guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. stablecoins, is aimed at creating a federal regulatory framework for stablecoins. Did not have a vote on May 27 based on available information. However, significant activity around the bill occurred earlier in May 2025, particularly around a key procedural vote on May 19th.
What's the date today?
23rd.
The 23rd. So it's supposed to have the vote on the 27th.
Okay. Because it says it. Okay.
Yeah, so it just went through some revisions, and they're supposed to vote on it just before, I think it's a long weekend or just before the weekend. They kind of want to push it through there. This is kind of a race between the EU and the United States. The EU either wants to give a warning to the United States with the Japanese bond market, or actually trigger a digital currency within Japan and Europe and really try to collapse the US dollar. Donald Trump has been trying to frantically push this bill through because he needs to borrow against the future earnings of those stable coins to secure the U.S. bond market. So this is going to be very interesting. This economic war has been going on behind the scenes since the first Trump administration, but it's really escalated to a fury frenzy since he took office the second time. It's shots fired from both sides economically, and they're really coming very close to end game here, which is digital currency and things like this. If Donald Trump is able to pull this off, you'll see the U.S. dollar maintain its status as the world currency, and then also U.S. citizens and citizens around the world will have options for stable coins and U.S. digital currency, but they won't be forced into a single solitary digital currency such as the EU wants to have. Okay, I just wanted to give an update on that. Now we'll go into Bill Gates here. Oh, hold on. I did have a video to kind of explain the bond market a little bit more simply. This guy kind of puts it in plain English, and I just wanted to give a better understanding for the viewers of the bond market.
Watch the bond market. The bond market is the basis. It's the backbone of all markets. It is the risk-free, meaning default-free, probably default-free, interest rate that determines what all asset returns are going to be. And when there is a breakdown of the supply-demand picture for the bond market, you see a certain type of market action. You see long rates rising relative to short rates. You see the currency go down. You see gold go up because there's a movement out of that bond market because there's a supply and demand imbalance. When that happens, that raises interest rates, and it puts the Federal Reserve and other central banks in a bind. That supply-demand imbalance, in order to deal with that, when there's not enough demand, they're torn between allowing interest rates to rise and have the negative effect that that has on markets and the economy, or coming in and printing money, essentially, and buying bonds in order to provide the demand for those bonds that aren't there, and that produces inflationary pressures.
Okay, so that was a good explanation. Him saying that bonds are completely insulary and you always make your money back was the one point of contention I would have, especially if there's a complete economic collapse pushing everybody into a digital currency. But that being said, overall, it was a good explanation. It's really the backbone of the economy, and you can see all trades really how they affect the bond market overall. They were able to save the bond market before through printing currency. Every country did this during the pandemic. So what we're seeing now is the United States can no longer continue to print money, especially if the bond market continues to go up. So what Trump is now trying to do is secure money rather than through printing the currency, is borrowing against stable coins futures. So if he's able to pull that off, that would be a great thing. This is a lot of the tariff policies actually go into this. I'm not going to get into the complexities of this, but people really don't understand Trump's tariff policies, and it has a lot more to do with just international trade. He has to withdraw somewhat from certain global markets that are going to be toxic and begin to collapse under a bond market collapse. So the strongest economy right now, people might not believe me, but is actually Russia. They've completely unplugged from the world economy. They're completely insulated. They do have some international trade of their natural resources, but their economy can function solely on its own. And if there does end up being a collapse, they're the most insulated from any kind of collapse. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Russia if bond markets do collapse. Okay, let's go into Bill Gates here. And why don't you read the headline? And I took quite a bit of notes here, so I'm just going to have you read off my notes directly after we kind of read the headline.
So the headline is Bill Gates funded climate change venture doesn't call for raising 70 million acres of trees, but this is a fact check where they're trying to hide what actually is happening.
So I got quite a few older articles where you'll know what happens when there's a lot of backlash. They go back and they actually rewrite the articles now. And I'm not sure if everybody's actually aware of this, but sometimes even in the morning when I first read an article and then go back later that day, certain things have been rewritten about the article, even though the article looks the same with the picture and the headline and things like this. Why don't you read a little bit of the article and then we'll go into my notes here.
And the article is all the way back from 2023.
Yeah, sorry. This is an issue that came up in 2023, 2024 when this was first discovered. It just came to my attention and I did quite a bit of research. I kind of knew about it back then, but I didn't know the extent. So this is why I'm bringing it to people's attention today. Oh, continue.
So the claim is, AP is doing a fact check. So the claim is Bill Gates is backing efforts to cut down 70 million acres of trees in order to fight global warming. And they assess it as false. There is no plan to cut down 70 million acres of trees. U.S. Forest Service has a 10-year plan to reduce the risk of wildfires across millions of acres of forests in the American West through a combination of controlled burns, selective tree culls, and other forest management strategies. And then Gates separately is among investors in a company proposing to help thin out California's densely packed forests and bury tree remains in Nevada. And then, but if we go into the facts, it says, Instead, he's among the lead investors in Kodama Systems, a startup company seeking to selectively remove trees from dense wildfire-prone forests in California and bury their remains across the state line in Nevada. Gates, through his Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which invests in companies developing technology and other innovative solutions to global warming.
Okay, so let's just think about this for a minute. He wants to cut down trees in California and then bury them. And not just bury them anywhere. He wants to transport them all the way to Nevada and then bury them in Nevada where there's no good use for them. If you're going to chop down trees, use them for housing, use them for lumber, use them for things that are actually going to benefit the housing market and the economy in which you're calling these trees. Instead, he just wants to bury them. Also, the amount of energy you're going to use cutting down these trees, logging these trees, transporting them, and then burying them is not going to be good for the environment. On top of that, trees suck carbon out of the air. They're a natural way of cleaning the carbon out of the air and things like this. That's how trees breathe. So,
but there, I mean, we have also talked about controlled burns and the importance of them and them stopping doing that.
Without a doubt, I think controlled burns are good, but cutting down and burying trees, if you're going to cut down the trees, just use them in housing and building houses. If
So
you're going to cut them down anyway and bury them, like take that extra step and turn them into legitimate lumber. I'm all for controlled burning. I talk about that a lot on this channel. Canada stopped doing it. California stopped doing it. Now California wants to cut down and bury trees. This seems like a moronic idea, and there may be some kind of scientific evidence that this would actually help the environment. This is the manipulation of science.
So let's go into what they actually said. So these claims are false. Alex Reed, a spokesperson for Bill Gates, wrote in an email on Tuesday. Kodama has developed forest management systems designed to increase forest productivity, prevent catastrophic wildfires, and increase carbon capture by burying dead trees, to permanently store the carbon they captured over their lifetimes. But they didn't say they were doing it to dead trees. Says Kodama spokesperson James Sedlak similarly rejected the claims as false, noting that the 70 million acres cited in the post misrepresent a figure cited in a Forbes article about the company. The July article states that the U.S. Forest Service aims to thin some 70 million acres of densely packed forests.
And if you're wondering how he's going to get paid for this, he's getting paid by the government per acre of carbon cleanup that his company is doing, and he's getting paid on a state level and a federal level, and he has major contracts with the federal government and things like this. So it's very interesting how these green policies that are supposed to help everybody really are just taking out a full middle step where you can cut down the trees, use the trees in housing, and there is a housing problem within the United States, Canada, and many other countries.
Yes, and then they say it's called ecological forest thinging, in which certain at-risk trees are culled from dense patches of forest to allow mature ones to thrive.
Okay, why don't you read my notes and then we'll watch the video.
Oh, there's a video? Okay. So it says... Hold on. The idea is backed by some of his investments, stems from the concept that burying biomass like trees or plant waste can lock carbon in the ground, preventing it from contributing to atmospheric CO2. One of the innovative initiatives involves a company called Kodama Systems, which explores burying wood to store carbon with Gates' investment in firm Breakthrough, Energy Ventures reportedly involved. The approach is controversial. Critics argue it is inefficient, potentially disruptive to ecosystems, and question the scalability. Burying vast amounts of wood requires significant land and energy. Supporters claim it would complement other carbon capture methods, as trees naturally absorb CO2, and burial might prevent decomposition-related emissions. Data is limited on its effectiveness, but studies suggest biomass burial could sequester carbon for centuries if done correctly, but it's not a silver bullet.
Yeah, I think you just use trees for housing. It's simple, and you solve two birds with one stone. And why wouldn't you come to that answer rather than burying trees? That's crazy. Okay, this was just another creator that which brought this to my attention, and then I started researching it this morning after I watched this video. So I thought I'd just give some credit to him.
Bill Gates and other investors are betting Kodama Systems can reduce carbon dioxide in the air by chopping down and burying trees, which has raised $6.6 million in seed funding from Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy and others. Scientists say burying trees can reduce global warming as well. I don't know where they find these scientists, by the way. To help address the problem, the U.S. Forest Services aims to thin out 70 million acres of western forests, mostly in California, over the next decade, extracting more than 1 billion tons of bone-dried biomass. Normally, when you cut down trees, when you're a lumberjack, when you have a lumber company, you're selling the lumber to build houses, people buying from Home Depot or whatever. They're arguing that they want to, rather than sell the timber, take all that wood and just bury it, because they're saying that that is a better solution. And so, in other words, this is a business because they're getting money to create carbon offsets. And this is what Bill Gates is fighting.
Okay, so that being said, I understand private companies cut down lumber and then sell it at Home Depot, but if the government's going to cut down these trees anyway and they're going to finance Bill Gates to do it, just give free lumber away to construction companies and start constructing houses. You're basically having the base material, which is a lot of the cost in housing, and then you just have to pay the laborers or train the laborers to do the work to build the housing that you need within the United States. It seems like a simple solution. Burying these trees seems like an ass-backward solution, even to a dumbass like me.
It seems very similar to one of the first stories we ever did on our other channel together about Canada killing fish.
Oh.
Canada killing fish for the environment, and the people from the area saying that those fish were not actually... Because they were saying that there was an overpopulation of fish, and the people in the area that know the area very well, some of them indigenous, were saying, no, these fish are actually have been here forever, and they shouldn't be ending their lives.
Let me explain the story a little bit better. There was somebody that was fishing in a very remote river in Canada. He was paddling up the river. He seen two guys in hazmat suits dumping huge canisters into a river, and they had a park ranger as their security, so nobody would kind of mess with them. He ran up on the boat and just started videotaping them and asking what they were doing. They wouldn't say what they were doing. They finished dumping the stuff and kind of scurried away. We have the video on our other channel, Nat and the Guy Espanol. The video is actually in English before we transferred the channel over. But we kept up on that story and did some research, and the news... it caused quite a lot of controversy in Canada. What ended up happening is there was an invasive species of some kind of fish in the river that were killing other fish, the government was saying. So they were going to poison all the fish in the river by basically poisoning the river. And they didn't tell anybody. So if anybody was going to drink out of that river, or somebody was going to catch fish like the fisherman was doing, he may have got indirectly poisoned by the fish.
Mm-hmm. And they were not...
It was completely funded by the Canadian government.
Yeah, it was via Environment Canada, which is supposed to protect the environment. And when they were questioned about it, they were not willing to say what the chemicals they were dumping were.
Yeah. Okay. But this is these brain schemed ideas they have are absolutely insane. Okay, let's go into the article with New Zealand now. Reverses its net zero climate policies. Basically, what's happening in New Zealand is a lot of these climate policies are backfiring. They're not able to get enough energy. Their energy bills are surging. There's a huge backlash of the population. 110 homes couldn't stay warm last winter. They called it a economy-killing climate policy. Most of these policies came from Premier, how do I say her name again?
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern.
She's no longer in power, and these policies are starting to slowly be reversed, which is a good thing. But this is a case where this is one of the first collapses of climate policy and the actual repercussions. Similar things are starting to happen in Canada. What happened in Germany, because they went down the same path and then took down all their nuclear power plants. It's actually crazy what's going on here.
And the spending and the waste of money that they did on all of these policies to then say, oh, no, it doesn't work, or it doesn't actually help the population or the planet.
And we do have test subjects where places, people have a diverse energy grid. And sorry to say it, it's actually China. They invest in coal, nuclear, and green energy as well. And they use them in the right sectors where they need it. Where they need gas for farm vehicles and things like this, and high industrial vehicles, they use gas. They use electric cars and solar panels for other things. They use coal for major manufacturing.
But they're still highly polluting.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying they're not highly polluting, but you have to transition. You can't put everything in one bucket. You need all three of them, have a large amount of energy, and then you can slowly transition off the worst one once the better forms are already producing the energy, which the West didn't do. There was an article I was reading. Trump is trying to fast track nuclear energy within the United States, saying that they can't compete with China right now because they don't have enough energy resources for the AI sector. And I have talked about in the past that he is giving specialized permits to fast track small nuclear reactors for AI facilities funded by Google and Meta. So they'll have a small nuclear reactor directly on the property to just energize their database, I guess you would call it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Why don't you read a little bit if you can, or can we not?
So
it was behind a paywall, wasn't it?
Not this one. This is an older article. And of course, it's coming from mainstream media. So they're actually enraged that New Zealand is going to fail to meet its 2015 net zero target. So here they're saying that it's a terrible thing. Scientists say government's approach to emissions cutting is high risk and reliant on immature technologies. It's from but now we're like, the reason why the story is relevant now is because we're seeing New Zealand is seeing the effects of having tried to adopt all of these policies, and it's just coming up now. But New Zealand's ambitious plan to reach net zero emissions by 2050 is at risk of being derailed as government backslides on climate policies, new figures show. Hold on. New projections show New Zealand will still be emitting a net 5 million tons by 2050 unless government can adopt new policies or technologies to reduce levels. Climate Change Minister Simon Watts said the government was committed to overreaching 2050 target and understands the need for action in climate change, but the government would not accept shutting down productive sectors of the economy to meet emissions targets. Instead, they will use technology-led approaches to allow production to increase as their emissions go down, saying that the government would try to find different.
Yeah, and this was a bit of an older article, and they're now moving away from those policies and returning to sanity. Hopefully they continue to go that direction, but that side of the world kind of went crazy ever since the pandemic and all their policies afterwards. But okay, let's go into this. I just got a quick clip from X, but this was very interesting. This gentleman does a lot of research. I refer to him quite a bit during the Canadian election. A lot of people discovered him. He's really big within Canada and Canadian YouTube politics, I guess you would say.
This is extremely important for Canadians and everyone in the Western world. You all need to be looking at what's happening in Australia right now. The Labour Party, which is the ruling party in Australia, is looking to implement a tax called an unrealized gains tax. And rightfully
so they're trying to implement this in Canada as well. They already did the study, so we kind of know where this already goes, and there will be no inheritance for the next generation and things like this, and people are getting upside down on their homes in Canada, a very large percentage.
So, as this article points out, there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences. An unrealized capital gains tax, or an unrealized gains tax in general, means that you actually haven't made the profit yet. But because you have the potential to make it, they're going to tax you on it. And I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say your house, you bought it for $500,000 and it's now worth $1.5 million. There's an unrealized gain of $1 million. The government wants to tax that. And sure, they're going to pony it up to, this is only going to affect the wealthy, and it's only going to be people who, have X amount of unrealized gains. But there is going to be unintended consequences. These people are also the people that drive the economy. Those are entrepreneurs. These are people who are brilliant, and they are also mobile. That means that they have no reason to have to stay in any country. And many of you guys may not know this, but this is part of why we have, actually not part of why, this is exactly why we have a lower GDP per capita. It's not that we're all earning less and less. The reason the reason the GDP per capita keeps going down is because our top performers are leaving. Think of you having, 10 extremely like genius students in your classroom. And let's say there's 50.
So Canada has one of the lowest GDP in the Western world, and it constantly does have that. And that is because some of the people that want to be entrepreneurially within Canada are constantly leaving the country. They don't want to pay the exorbitant tax rate, the crazy tax policies they're putting in. They want to tax housing. They already charge you property tax, and now they want to put unrealized gain tax on top of that. It doesn't become efficient to own your own home. The saying, you'll own nothing and you will be happy, from the World Economic Forum, lies extremely true in Canada and Australia.
Of you. When you lose those kids that are getting 100%, that's going to bring the class average down. You no longer have the collective benefit of having those geniuses in your classroom, like them helping you with tests, them helping you doing your homework. They're completely gone out of that economy or out of that school. They left the school system to go to a completely different school. That is fundamentally what will happen, not only in Australia, but is happening right now in Canada because of the high gross amount of taxes that we're all being charged. The unrealized gains, or the unrealized gains tax that is being looked at, was also looked at by the Liberal Party, and it was studied specifically and for homes. So for those individuals who have maybe paid off their mortgage, they're retired, this is something that you're going to want to pay close attention to. Hope this helps.
Okay, that was that clip. Overall, we already fled Canada, and we weren't rich. We were poor, and we fled Canada for Mexico, which a lot of people would say you were crazy if they just knew the surface level and they don't know what's going on in the country, but I'm much happier in Mexico. Also, people that are high earners and would typically really pump a lot of revenue into the company, start businesses and things, are leaving the country, kind of like what he said. And this is why the GDP is so little. The Canadian government actually knows this, and they are doing confession through projection. Mark Carney, as well as the MP from British Columbia, as well as the former finance minister, are all coming out and saying, oh, America's smartest and brightest are now fleeing to Canada because they don't like American politics, and we are welcoming them in. They're going to create businesses and drive wealth for Canada. It's the opposite. What's actually going on is the best and the brightest are fleeing Canada for the United States and free market capitalism, where if they succeed, 70% of their wealth isn't taken from them.
And I mean, the Prime Minister himself did the exact same thing. He moved his company down to New York, to the U.S., before he got officially elected. So, yeah. I mean, again, confession through projection. They literally did that.
He moved one of the largest companies in Canada, which was Brookfield Asset Management. It's like the BlackRock of Canada. Moved it completely out of Canada into New York for some of these specific reasons.
Yeah, right before he got elected.
Okay, let's go into the next article, and that is President Trump putting Apple on blast.
So Trump threatens 50% tariffs on EU and 25% penalties on Apple as his trade war intensifies.
Okay, why don't you read my notes, because I had both of these separated, but they put them in one article here. So the notes I took, this is just President Trump's statement on True Social, basically.
So it's been long informed that Tim Cook of Apple, that Trump expects their iPhones will be sold in the U.S.
No.
No?
No.
That is the note.
I have long ago informed Tim Cook of Apple.
So that's what Trump is saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so Trump says, I have long informed Tim Cook of Apple that I expect their iPhone that will be sold in the U.S. will be manufactured and built in the U.S., not India or any place else. If that's not the case, a tariff of at least 25% must be paid by Apple to the U.S. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, yeah, it's going to be very interesting what actually happens here. Tim Cook has been given special privileges in the past by Trump and exemptions because Trump really does value Apple overall as an American company. Tim Cook was going to move his manufacturing to India, thinking he was going to get one of these exemptions. And Trump's not on board with that. He wants manufacturing directly back in the U.S. Whether robots have to manufacture this or however they got to cut cost, Apple is in real trouble here.
But even if they can cut costs in the U.S., wouldn't that just skyrocket the price of iPhones anyways?
iPhone actually has a pretty good profit rate. But man, I love Apple because the ecosystem works for production. All my iPads interlink with my phones, interlink with my computers. I used to use Windows, and man, it was a pain when I used to work for some photography companies to transfer the photos, the amount of time it would take. Apple, everything works great, but they're in trouble because you're going to see a dip in new products and things like this as this manufacturing has to be transferred wherever they're going to do it. They may just pony up and pay the 25% tariff. At this point, it looks like China may cut a deal with the United States, which would be 20 to 35%. And Apple is invested to the tits in China, meaning they have billions of dollars in manufacturing already placed there. Even to move it to India would be a huge cost and a huge risk. So they might be just eat the 35% cost in the short term and keep their manufacturing in China and maybe slowly move some manufacturing to the US to placate Trump, hoping somebody else gets in the office next.
And I don't think they would eat it. It would be passed on to the consumer, most likely.
Most definitely it's going to be passed on to the consumer. But man, Apple of every tech company is really in a tight spot here. And I really hope they pull through because I do like Apple products, even though I do think they're overpriced.
And unfortunately, they're still trying to be, especially Tim Cook, ideologically driven rather than common sense driven.
Yeah. I mean, I resisted going to Apple for years. And finally, when we started doing fast-paced photography where I had to get large quantities of photos edited every night, and then now especially in videography production, I couldn't do it without Apple, or it would be extremely difficult. The other companies just aren't catching up with the seamless integration of all their products.
And just the video editing and the way the chips work as well. I mean, I've been on Apple for way longer when I was going to study film, and then I ended up not studying film. Apple was just the solution because most of the programs are also work way better with Apple than with Windows or any other.
Well,
OS.
yeah, and your other options are what? Bill Gates, like he's just as crazy as the ideological bent of Apple. And then your other option is Huawei. Now, I watched a documentary on Huawei. Supposedly they have seamless interface, even better than Apple now. But I used to use Huawei when I was in Canada because it was cheaper and they had no integration. It was horrible.
And I wouldn't trust
using
Chinese technologies.
Products.
Sorry,
Okay.
but no. Rafa says, I used to live in the beautiful Ciudad Juarez. Oh, that's in Chihuahua.
Oh, that's where we traveled through.
Yeah.
It's really hot there.
Yes.
Did you see the dust storm?
When we were coming down from Vancouver, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd been there before.
There was a
times.
huge dust storm that looked like something off of a movie about a month ago. It was insane.
So he says, I used to live in the beautiful Ciudad Juarez. There's a company there named Foxconn that supposedly made iPhones.
Oh, yeah. Foxconn is... Oh, maybe he doesn't know the story of
Or maybe they had parts. I don't know.
So Foxconn is a well-known Apple manufacturer. They have another Foxconn facility in China. They put netting around the roof of the Foxconn building because people were jumping off the top of the building to end themselves, and the nets would catch the workers, and then they can put them back to work
in China.
In China, because they were overworking the workers in China. And then other buildings, after Foxconn did that with their netting, other manufacturer buildings in China started doing the same because they were having mass ending of themselves within the manufacturing market within China. So
but it's interesting to see that he's saying that, I mean, there was one in Mexico.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't have the nettings in Mexico.
No, I mean, like, I didn't know that there was even Foxconn outside of China.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know. I thought almost all their manufacturing was based out of China, but maybe they're starting to diversify.
Who knows? Because he said used to live, so.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into the next story here, and that's another President Trump story. Yes. And why don't you just read my notes for this one? Well, you already kind of read the headline here. My notes were pretty intensive. Again, this is a statement from Donald Trump. So this is from his direct words.
Okay, so the European...
Read the headline first.
Okay. Trump, your headline or the
My headline.
President Trump is stopping the European Union with a 50% tariff starting June 1st. The European Union, which was formed for the primary purpose of taking advantage of the United States on trade, has been very difficult to deal with. This is Trump saying it. Their powerful trade barriers, VAT taxes, ridiculous corporate penalties, non-monetary trade barriers, monetary manipulations, unfair and unjustified lawsuits against American companies, and more have led to a trade deficit with the U.S. of more than 250,000 million a year, a number which is totally unacceptable. Our discussions with them are going nowhere. Therefore, I am recommending
250 billion a year.
billion. Sorry, I'm bad at math. 250 billion.
Billion.
Yes, our discussions with them are going nowhere. Therefore, I am recommending a straight 50% tariff on the European Union starting on June 1st, 2025. There is no tariff if the product is built or manufactured in the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Did read my notes that I put under that?
The European Union exploits 250 billion trade deficit with hidden VAT taxes and barriers, bleeding the U.S. dry. 50% tariff would end their game. Their 108 billion threat shows fear. A VAT, value-added tax, is a consumption tax levied on the value added to goods and services at each stage of production or distribution.
Okay, so the EU is trying to use the US, and Canada did the same. A lot of countries were doing this around the world, and this is what was floating the global economy. He just wants countries to start treating them fairly. The billions of dollars they're charging tech companies, U.S. tech companies, because they violate their free speech law, because they supposedly use hate speech. They're not going to catch everything on their website, but they're the EU and the UK are specifically attacking U.S. companies through taxes, through tariffs, through levies and fines. And Trump's trying to even the playing field. He's threatening a high tariff, not just because of those reasons, but the EU is at an economic war with the United States right now. They were planning on engaging a wider war with Russia. They want to try to keep this war, the EU wants to try to keep this war going, hoping Trump's going to be out of office, and then they can widen that war to kind of save their economy, go into a digital currency, erase all of their debts, and take the large amount of natural resources Russia has. They have more natural resources than any other country on earth. This is what the EU is expecting to float their economy for the next 100 years. This whole thing is falling apart under Trump, and the EU is attacking the American bond market and the global bond market right now, trying to collapse the US dollar. Trump's very aware of this, even though this isn't in the news. There's the warning signs of this is happening. I've been talking about it on this show. The administration won't directly talk about it because they don't want it to cause a mass panic in the financial markets or in the general public. So this tariff that you see on the EU where he's threatening 50%, this is an economic war that's going on between the EU and the United States right now. And it's going on a lot of different levels. He's not only trying to equal the playing field, he's trying to say you need to back off on the bond market.
Yes. And then Rafa says, wow, I did hear a story several years ago, but I didn't know the company was Foxconn. Yes, it was Foxconn in Shenzhen, China. And then he also says, according to Google Maps, the plant is still over there. And I believe, because I just looked into it, the Foxconn in Mexico, they're building quite a few, will be one of the biggest producers of NVIDIA chips.
Yeah. And overall, Trump is really focused on cartels and things like that, wants to clean it up because he's going to need overflow for manufacturing. The things that are high skilled level to manufacture, he wants to get done in the United States, but the overflow and all the sub products that a lot of cars, cell phones, things like that are going to need, he's going to want to put in Mexico, but he can't have cartels in Mexico, kind of controlling the country. He needs to know that there's not going to be any interference in these manufacturing plants or the transport of these products. So right now he might be saying, oh yeah, there's a tariff. We don't want to trade with Mexico, this and that. There's going to be overflow, and Canada's not going to get that. Canada's cost is too high. Wages in Mexico are low. It's a perfect emerging economy for the U.S. to rely on. He's just trying to negotiate the best deals overall, and he wants the primary manufacturing done in the U.S., but there is going to be an overflow of sub-manufacturing, which he's going to want to be done in Mexico if he can get all of the things within the country kind of lined up.
And unfortunately, wages are low in Mexico. That's not a good thing. But it is for anybody that wants to produce things, but not for the people.
No, but you got to look what happened in China as well. In China, wages used to be extremely low, bottom of the barrel low. And then they built their manufacturing base. Wages in Mexico wages in China now are the equivalent to Mexico. That's why it's actually cheaper to manufacture in Mexico, because wages in China actually came up. And the same thing will happen in Mexico. Once manufacturing comes here and a lot of people work in the manufacturing industry, slowly over time, their wages will go up.
Hopefully.
And then the manufacturing becomes more and more skill-based, where you're not just manufacturing bottom of the barrel things. And at that point, you'll have nationalized companies emerge within Mexico. This is what China did. If Mexico could do the same, it would be great.
Not nationalized. Nationalized means the government owns it, but companies within Mexico will start to grow.
Yeah, well, I am kind of saying nationalized in the sense that the government will back Mexican companies, just like the U.S. backs U.S. companies, just like the Chinese government backs Chinese companies. Right now, most of the major companies in Mexico are actually owned by subsidiaries either in China or the United States. So hopefully Mexican-owned companies would emerge eventually. Okay. And let's go into the next story. That was quite a bit of Trump financial news.
This?
Yeah, this is it. So why don't you read the headline first?
So this is coming from Mario Nafwal. On May 27th, the Council of the European Union will hold yet another hearing to decide if Hungary should lose its voting rights. This will be the 8th such hearing since 2018. Apparently, the European Union's version of democracy is keep voting until the dissenters shut up. Hungary's crime not following... Okay.
That's good enough for now. What's going on in Hungary is the EU wants to take away the voting rights of Hungary, because Hungary is one of the only dissenting voices in the EU. There is considerable unrest in Eastern Europe, where more countries are starting to think like Hungary. The EU needs to shut this down now, because they used to vote in mass and they all used to vote identically, even if it was against their own country's interest. They've done this 8 times now to Hungary. The Hungarian president has stood strong. If they are able to take away Hungarian voting rights, I would expect a fracture within the EU and countries wanting to leave. They're able to keep these countries locked into the EU through their financial banking system and their loan systems and their debt systems. So how Hungary's going to break free, I don't know. But if they take away the voting rights, I really hope they do. We've seen what happened in Romania recently with the recent elections. The one populist candidate that was anti-war wanted to take the NATO base out of Romania, won in a landslide. The EU then disqualified that election, said that candidate couldn't take office, and then they held another election. And that secondary election, somehow the EU candidate won their vote, and now they're going forward with this EU base, and they're going to put a lot of airplanes within Romania to prepare for airstrikes in Eastern Europe, which would obviously be targets in Ukraine and Russia. So that's going to make Romania one of the first targets if they do engage. There are currently troops stationed in Romania from France, the UK, and other European countries. They're staging for when they can move into Ukraine without any backlash from Russia.
What do you think of the claims against Orban?
I love Orban as a president personally. He's a populist. He's a conservative. He's in the EU. So as much as backlash as Trump gets, he gets 1,000 times more backlash. He gets legalistic backlash. He gets media backlash. They try to take away his voting rights. They try to take away his traditional values.
But what about the fact that he called the government and essentially, they say, did everything in a very dictatorial manner?
Yeah, you have to realize what was happening in Hungary. Hungary was the pet project of George Soros specifically. He invested hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in media organizations and NGOs to try to take over that country. The fact that he hasn't been able to do that, it was thanks to Viktor Orban, and it was because Viktor Orban stood up strong against George Soros and these NGOs. The country would have been completely taken over. It would have been the next Ukraine, fed to the war machine. He might have had to do some pretty drastic. He might have had to take some pretty drastic measures, but it was because he was facing very, very drastic opposition. He didn't have the same money base that George Soros did and that the U.S. did at the time. So.
Okay.
And we got into our last story, and this was actually a Vancouver story. I was very surprised to see this update. When this story first came up, did we play the original video on the show?
Yes, we did.
Okay, this is her kind of after her face healed. Her face was a lot worse.
So what happened is she was attacked while she was visiting Vancouver. She was attacked by a homeless person.
Why don't you read the headline?
Okay. Woman who was brutally attacked in Vancouver still voted for the Liberals after her attack. She responds here nonchalantly to attacker getting released too. If an attack of this magnitude can't make you vote for change in law reform, nothing will. I've suddenly lost sympathy for her.
And this is how the Liberals got in power in Canada. And I worked at a bar, and you'd see a lot of people that look like they have less progressive values, and you would talk to them, and they just ate up the propaganda hook, line, and sinker. The fact that the Liberals control the media within Canada, the population is done. This is why we left Canada, is because I have no faith in the Canadian people to fix their system through the voting measures. This is why the Alberta separatist movement, I'm all on board with that. I think that's the only way to wake up Canadians and really shake them. If Alberta separates and then their economy thrives, the rest of Canada is going to really question their government and their basic progressive values.
And Rafa says, leaving for a meeting. Thanks and have a great day. Thank you, Rafa, for being here.
Adios. Have a good time at the movies, by the way. Okay, let's play this video from this lady. And before we do, her face is a lot more healed up. It was completely black and blue.
Oh, sorry.
Completely black and blue before this. She's going to go into some things I vehemently disagree with, and it shows that she is a sheep and she is asleep.
And this was pretty shortly after she got attacked, because now it's been quite a few weeks, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. She looks a lot better than she did the day of.
No, but this is from April.
Yeah.
It was from a month ago.
Yeah,
she got attacked.
this was before the election. You just read the headline.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to respond to this because I'm getting tons of similar messages, comments, and even a ton of people in my own personal life have reached out to ask me, did you know he was released? I did. When I posted my video on Wednesday, I didn't know at the time that he had been released, but I had spoken to victim services earlier and knew that there was a likelihood and chance that he would be released. So I wasn't surprised, and obviously I was notified when he was. I think at this point, I honestly haven't yet formed an opinion of how I feel about it. I'm going to need to sit with it for a while probably, but I'll just say...
Sit with it for a while. This people might not know the whole story. This gentleman attacked her for no reason in a park, tried to rape her. She had to fight him off, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 5 times. She managed to barely fight him off. She was black and blue. She's much healed up here. When she managed to get out of the park, she ran to the first group she seen. It happened to be undercover police officers, which then arrested the gentleman. And a few days later, they released this man. And they said he has to stay in Vancouver, which is the place he did the assault with in the first place. She's a tourist, so now the fact that she went back home, she's not concerned about him being released. Well, what about the general public? You have this crazy liberal mentality when certain things we have to be completely authoritarian and implement green energy laws and vaccination laws and everything else. But when it comes to you being attacked and then the man being released, since you went back home, it doesn't matter to her anymore.
And I mean, that dude was known to police from before as well. Yeah. So it means they had been really here.
He had a long track record of mental illness and assaults on people. He's a high risk offender. He should not be let out. So, and I'm somebody that does not believe in unproportional bonds and things like this. But in high risk offender cases, you have to keep them in jail.
No, being that I live on the other side of the country, and that this was a random attack, I'm not in any fear that I'm going to run into him, that he's going to come attack me.
What about others?
Anything like that. So I think that has a big kind of component as to why I wasn't immediately very, very upset. Because I don't feel like I'm in any further danger. I would just like to say that, I hope he adheres to all of his bail conditions. Because they are quite strict, and I hope that...
They're not strict enough. Well, he assaulted her in the park literally for no reason.
And had a
5
history of
times.
assaults.
He had a history of assault, a history of mental illness. She hopes he follows his probation. He didn't follow the actual law in the first place. And this is why personal protection, and I'm a gun rights activist, I believe in gun rights. And the reason she got assaulted, she was lucky to get away from this guy. If she would have ability to equalize the playing field, maybe she wouldn't have got attacked for the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th time.
That no one else is harmed, including his own family, because I know as a part of his bail conditions that he's been like remanded into basically like his mother's custody, and he's on house arrest at her residence, and that he's had previous mental health issues that, you know, they found the need to call the police for. I know every mother loves their children. And I did see the interview that she gave to one of the media outlets. And again, I didn't really have a huge response to it because I understand, you know, this is your child. So I do just hope that if this was solely based on mental health issues, that this person does get the resources and support that they need so that this doesn't happen to anybody else. Because that is what would really upset me, is if, you know, for any reason they go and do this to another person, they do this to someone, you know, living at the same residence where they're staying. I just don't want anyone else to get hurt. But at the same time, I know sometimes getting those resources and supports, especially with our mental health care in this country, can be very difficult.
She is an indicative, basically what happened to her with this person that assaulted her for the last 5 times. And her reaction is, we need to let him out. He needs to get the help. We can't keep him in jail, even though he has a past history of violent assault and mental illness. And, oh yeah, his mother took his side, but that's okay because I understand. I'm a liberal. Well, this is what the Canadian government is doing to the Canadian people repeatedly. They're repeatedly assaulting the general public and crossing every red line, whether it's economically or ideologically, and the Canadian people are taking it just like this woman did, and they're not standing up for themselves. They're not standing up through the vote.
Well, so in some ways I understand his release, but in other ways it's kind of like, I don't know how I feel about it. Obviously, I'm a victim to him, so it doesn't make me feel good, but I'm not in tatters over it or anything. And, you know, we'll just see how this progresses with the case. And I'll keep my fingers crossed that he does get the supports and he does adhere to his bail conditions. And no one else is a victim like I am.
Okay, and this is why you have grape gangs across Europe, across the UK, and things like this. Okay, I guess that's it for today's show. That upsets me quite a bit because I'm from Canada.
Just quickly, she replied to another comment under that video saying, I don't know what the comment originally said, but said, it hasn't. I voted early for the Liberals after this incident. That's still where my values align. And even though I think there's a huge gap in each party, I'm still very left leaning.
Oh my God. Canada is gone. Gone. And we played the other day, the sea cans, the big, boxes that go on back of big rigs. What are they called again? Sea containers? When a transport truck has a big thing on the back.
Container?
That comes off.
I call it a container. I don't know what it's
called. The
called.
containers, they're moving a bunch of these containers so they can move in senior citizens into these containers in Canada. And they said, oh, this is going to be great housing for them. We're going to have social services there to provide all their needs. They're living in a freaking shipping container. Like, it's crazy.
Yes.
Okay. We're done for today. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. It was very politically heavy today, other than the Lilo and Stitch, I guess.
Yes.
We'll be back tonight at 9:15 Central Time with live with Nat and the Guy. That's our main show. Nat also has another show on our other channel called
Not in the Guy in Espanol.
And that's at 8 p.m. Central Time.
Yes.
Adios for now.